a playlist original.
Tired of school? With Joan of Arc.
Noah's wife?
Like to travel?
Can we go anywhere we want at any time?
You can do anything you want.
Let's reach out and touch someone.
Meet interesting people.
How's it going, Royal Ugly Dude?
Put them in the iron maiden.
Excellent!
Execute them.
Bogus.
Then hitch a ride with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Party on, dude.
Rated PG. Starts Friday, February 17th at a theater near you.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your hosts, Gaius and Jackson. Another anniversary episode, our fourth, I believe now.
Someone's keeping track over here.
trying to keep score for all you guys at home. Also, I just want to see how many we do this year because it's a pretty big anniversary year. So I want to see how many we can crank out. I need to remember. I keep wanting to go back and see how many we did last year to see if we will top that number this year. I am going to
good idea.
Circle back probably tonight and count those and probably post those up on our stories and see like, okay, can we top that number this year? Because it's a pretty big anniversary year all the way around. And with this one, again, a completely different one from all the ones we've done so far. We have covered a late 90s teen drama. We did a horror movie remake. We had an inspirational drama from 1999. And now we have a most excellent comedy from 1989. Nice. Celebrating its I try. I was like, how can I throw that in there? Celebrating its 35th anniversary is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, originally released on February 17th, 1989. It is a science fiction comedy directed by Stephen Herek and written by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon. And the plot: in 2688, humanity exists as a utopian society due to the inspiration of the music and philosophy of the two great ones, William Bill S. Preston Esquire and Theodore Ted Logan. One of the citizens, Rufus, is tasked by the leaders to travel back to San Dimas, California in 1988 using a phone booth-shaped time machine to ensure that the young Bill and Ted, two dim-witted high school students, successfully pass history class. If they fail, they won't graduate high school, and Ted's father, Police Captain Logan, plans to ship Ted to a military school in Alaska, ending Bill and Ted's fledgling band Wild Stallions and altering history. The film stars Keanu Reeves, Alex Winter, and George Carlin. It received mostly positive reviews upon its initial release, and on a budget of $10 million, it ended up grossing $40.5 million by the end of its run. So it was pretty successful for late 80s, teen movie definitely. Standard. Yeah. So was this a first? Have you seen this movie before? I don't know. I can't remember if we talked about it.
First time watch for myself. I have not seen literally any Bill and Ted content, movies, videos at all. I was very much aware of it. I was surprised to find out that this movie is the origin of the conspiracy Keanu meme. That meme where he's kind of got like the disheveled black hair and he's looking like all confused. Like I that was seeing that moment on screen. I was like, oh my god, I didn't know that's where this came from. But first time watch. For myself, quite interesting. That premise, just hearing you break that down, I was like, oh my god, that is a lot of story in this movie. You'd think it would be like this epic long watch, but they wrapped it into a nice 90 minutes. It was a great, quick little watch, very fast. It flew by, which I was surprised. And also surprised to find out the original cut of this movie was almost 2.5 hours. So
I read that today. I was like, what? I was like, wow, how did they? I mean. Yeah, what's interesting to me about it is because even when I read that plot description, I was like, that sounds so fucking ridiculous on paper. I don't even know how you like sell that to anyone. And I know they had a hard time selling it initially because it was, it such a off the wall idea. And they finally had one production company that had it at D&G for its initial release, and then they went bankrupt and they had to find another studio to release it, which is why there's a lot of references to 1988. Even though this movie came out in 1989, they shot it earlier than that. So because they had planned on releasing it at another studio, but then Orion Pictures eventually picked it up in 1988 to distribute in 1989. But yeah, I would like to know, I guess, your kind of Cliff Notes version of what you thought as a first time watch of it. because like I said, it is silly, and I'm pretty sure you thought it was pretty silly while you were watching it, but I don't know, for some reason it mostly works, at least for me.
Yeah, I'll answer your question, then I'll get into, I'll follow that up by asking you about your experience with it. But while your question's fresh in my mind, my cliff notes. So I knew very early on, I threw this on like right after I made supper. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but very early on in this movie, I was like, okay, if I'm going to have any fun with this, I need to turn my brain off and not look at it like I would any other movie. Like, admittedly, I can be a little bit snobby with my movie watching. So usually isn't my sort of flavor of film, but I mean, I appreciated it for what it was. And it was a pretty like goofy late 80s comedy. I love Keanu Reeves. I'd never seen Alex Winter act before, but he was great. Their chemistry was like lightning in a bottle. Really, they were awesome together. And I guess that comes down to a little bit of the casting process. They found their Ted and Keanu Reeves, and then I think Alex Winter, they kind of found out that they had this great chemistry and cast them a little bit after the fact. Anyway, great casting. It was a lot of fun. I mean, again, as far as comedies go, not my forte usually, but this one is like a pretty upbeat, fun, hard to really pick at it, just considering how goofy, zany, and like off the wall it really was. And it was kind of fun for me because I literally did not know anything about this. I knew it was like all I would have been able to tell you about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure before watching it, just from like clips I've seen of those actors in those roles over the years, is that it's like a goofy stoner comedy. That's just what I gathered from like how their dialogue is delivered. Just no way, like all that sort of stuff. I didn't really know anything about the plot, so I was pleasantly surprised to see how much of history it draws from, because I'm a huge history nerd. Like that's what I studied in university. Like I just got a soft spot for that topic, so wouldn't have guessed at all that the premise of the movie focuses on them going back in time and basically pulling historical figures out of history to use for their history report at the end of the movie. Like that was very zany and funny. But yeah, it was all over the place for me. There's stuff I liked about it, stuff I didn't love about it, but overall it was like very charming, pretty easy breezy watch, and one that I'm glad I at least got to see. Now I'm in on a lot of the jokes, which feels nice.
Yeah, now it's under your belt. So
yeah, now it's under my belt, exactly. But you were just a young sap when this came out. So when did you first see?
I was pretty young when it came out. Yeah, I do remember watching it a lot as a kid. On VHS, like a lot, because it was just a really fun movie then. And I think I appreciate it. It, like I said, I think we both kind of expressed that it is really wacky on paper. That it seems really so off the wall. But I think what I appreciated more as I got older and even rewatching it now, it is really off the wall, but it's a little smarter than it has any right to be too. Like the way it kind of toys with, I guess not toys with, but like kind of use these kind of historical figures in a really fun, interesting way. And I just love that, like, this whole big thing rides on this like history class presentation. Like it's not really like a big like epic like like you would think from like a time travel movie. Like
what are the world stakes?
Yeah, what are the stakes? Right, the stakes are like they just have to make it back in time to do this history presentation, or they're gonna fail. And if they fail, Ted goes to military school, and their not so great band doesn't eventually, I guess, become a really successful band in the future. So yeah, it sounds like so ridiculous, but it works pretty well for me. I think it also helps that San Dimas is maybe 40 minutes or so away from where we're at
too. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
And it's the home of Raging Waters, which is like a water park that's really famous in that area.
I'm guessing they filmed there.
They filmed some of it there too.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And one of my good friends, Stevie, when I first met her like 13, 15 years ago, she's from there and she still lives there. And she, even though she makes the trek to come down to Hermosa Beach most weekends, San Dimas is her home. And when I first met her and she told me that she was from there, that was the first thing I brought up, other than Raging Waters, was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And she was like, everyone, that's the first thing when they hear that I'm from there, they're always like, yep, the home of like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure or Raging Waters. So it has like kind of like cultural significance if you're from the area too. I think that kind of helps.
Oh, big time. I would love for something to be filmed over here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. It would be super
right.
nice. The closest thing I got is Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse was filmed in Halifax, which is like the big city in the neighboring province. So that's all I got to work with. So yeah, to be from somewhere where such an iconic movie would take place, I wouldn't. I would definitely eat that up. That's awesome.
And it's cool too, because a lot of the I was kind of thinking about this when you were watching it, because a lot of the humor, and I guess how Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves kind of built their characters, they got a lot of the kind of speech and style from certain parts of California. So like Venice Beach, a lot of those kind of areas that kind of informed what their characters sounded like. So a lot of it is very like Southern California-esque, and it's depiction of the two characters. So I did wonder how like you not being from here, how you would like see that and react to it. It might hit differently if you live here or from the area, because you're like, oh, that's exactly, even in 1989, if you watch like old footage from that period or whatever, like that was a lot of the style and a lot of the speech, even into like the early 90s. So it was, it's very much I think it's more fun if you like kind of know, like, oh, this is definitely what they're kind of poking fun at, and it makes a little bit more sense. But I was curious how you kind of viewed it, being the Canadian and not from not anywhere near here.
So thankfully I was in on the joke, because I'm aware of that SoCal sort of surfer bro dialogue and how it's been like, mocked and mimicked and imitated over the years and several other mediums. So I got it right away. And it was kind of funny, honestly. I hadn't really seen it that intricately done, I guess, or where like our main characters are so ingrained in that sort of like style of their culture. Yeah, exactly. So it was fun. It was honestly like there were times where it got a little old. I'm not gonna lie. I've heard them say, I mean, it's iconic. Like hearing them say excellent is like hilarious, and like the
bodacious,
yeah, that's what I like most. Like the changing of the adjectives. Like they put most and then some crazy adjective after it. I like that was constantly changing. There was some dialogue that I thought was very recycled after at some point, but again, I was like not really critiquing it like that. I thought it was just for the most part pretty fun, but I did shake my head a couple times. No, for the most part, I was in with the joke. Like I thought it was funny. I was curious though, like you being from California, if that like are there people is that like an exaggeration, or are there people that are that speak like that to that degree?
It's I want to say it is, but there are definitely some, even like there. I mean, even as recently as like maybe 5 years ago, I had a friend. He moved to New York of all places, considering how SoCal he is. But his name was Bobby Lee, and he pretty much talked like that. And I would always be like, and I would just be like, I can't tell if if this is like a joke or if this is like serious, because I feel like I feel like it's like an effort to speak that way. Like it's not like a natural like accent, like
people will probably say that about a Canadian accent too, though. So
I know you probably get like the A thing a lot, and a boot, and what was the other
one? Which I mean, that is a total fabrication. I've literally never heard anybody say a boot, but it's definitely something that people associate with Canadian dialect, but I've never heard it. But
they blame South Park and the South Park movie for doing that to you guys.
Rightfully,
that's the only reason I thought that. But yeah, he spoke like that a lot, and then I realized that since it was so effortless, I know that he kind of soaked in beach culture, and it was just very bro-y in his speech, and he wasn't stupid by any means, but like I think it's almost like that you have that version, the guy version with that, and then you also kind of have like the Valley Girl stereotype too. That's from here, and that is also I know, and that's also fairly accurate. There are some girls that do talk like that. So I mean, I think in some areas it was exaggerated, but there are definitely, it exists. I don't see it so much like at all anymore. Thankfully. I mean, it's hard not to like want to make fun of it, because it's like, man, you don't wake up one day and like just suddenly, I mean, you have to like, that has to be like put on, right? Yeah. But what I found by watching this one this time too, and what I've always thought is that even though Bill and Ted are technically, I guess what you would describe as like kind of stupid, not with it, they are still very, very likable. And
yes, exactly.
And that probably has a lot to do with just Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves really I guess vibing with each other and like getting to know each other. And I think I read what you might have read too, that it was like through the audition process after they found Ted is when Alex Winter got involved. And during that audition process, they saw how good they were together. And that's how they kind of ended up picking Alex Winter. And honestly, Alex Winter, the only thing I know him from other than these movies was The Lost Boys. He is the first vampire to get like staked in that movie. I think he had,
dude, you're so right.
I don't think he has like a lot of lines in the movie.
I recognize him now that you mentioned it from that, though.
But yeah, he is the first vampire to get the stake from Corey Feldman in The Lost Boys. And then, of course, he had done after this, he did the sequel to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And then they did the 2020, the third one, Bill and Ted Face the Music Together. And Alex Winter has gone on to become like a writer, and he does more stuff in that area now. But they've always remained close, which I think is also really cool that they've stayed friends since doing this wacky movie together. And you kind of can see it. Like I watched I don't know. I wonder how I would feel about the 2021 now, because I watched it. Of course, it came out during the pandemic, so that's when I watched it. Yeah, I watched it during the pandemic, and that's when we were like hungry for anything to watch.
Okay,
so
what were your thoughts initially?
I liked it then, but I wonder if I would have a different outlook on it now, because I was just so like, I just need something like to, some movies to digest, and get something in.
4 years ago now. I remember when that movie was being promoted, and I knew exactly like what the characters were from, but I still at that point had never seen the original, so I was like, what? Yeah. I didn't really have any investment in it, but hearing now that it was 2020, I'm like, holy smokes.
Yeah, and I think if that movie would have had a full theatrical release, it probably would have been successful. A lot of people wanted a sequel for years after Bogus Journey, and it's one of those things where Bogus Journey didn't do as well as the first movie. It did enough where it was like, oh, that's moderately successful, but it's a little different. It's a little different from Excellent Adventure, and it's a little more off the wall and wacky. And but it became like a cult classic after its theatrical release, which is why I think people were hungry for a third movie, and they're interested in doing a fourth one. They just had to see what kind of comes together. But I love that friendship. No, it seems is very genuine, and it starts in this first movie where you can tell they are really just like they get each other. And I don't know, I think I think a lot of it was on the page, but it seems like they might have improv a little bit.
I'm sure they must have a bit. I've heard them described as two halves of the same brain, which I think perfectly encapsulates their dynamic.
Yeah. It's interesting though. Keanu Reeves, I think they're both very good in this movie. I think this film and this image of him in this movie stayed with Keanu Reeves for a very, very long time, because there is a lot of, for a while, Keanu Reeves wasn't viewed as like a good actor. Like he was just like kind of like, he transitions into like Point Break and Speed, and
I know
he's
I
good
love
at
Point Break so much, so I'm like, I don't get that, but my mom can't stand Keanu, or doesn't like him, doesn't think he's a good actor. But she's not like that. Yeah, she wouldn't know all of his great performances. She probably is associating him with this movie, if I'm guessing.
Hot take from your mom. But I think that kind of stayed. Like I remember he's in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and like
he earns that flag. I'll give him that.
And and he sounds very much like a California guy trying to put on like a proper, like, I guess, British accent in that movie.
And
it's not great. But then eventually he learns to like play to his strengths, and I think he kind of finds his niche later in his career as an action star, which is great. And I think he's also, there's other movies like he's proven himself to be a good actor in. He's in a movie called The Gift, where he plays like an abusive like redneck in that movie, and he's genuinely frightening in it, so he can be good. But I really think the Bill and Ted persona kind of
stuck with him,
carried on for a long, for a long time after, throughout his early part of his career. I think.
I don't argue that at all. I kind of associate in that way too. Before the 2010s, before John Wick really resurrected his career, but I guess there was a lot of his pivotal roles I wouldn't have seen at that point either. Like I didn't see The Matrix until really late. But I'd always really liked him in Point Break and Speed. Like those are my Keanu movies. So I guess but I did get the sense that too, like those movies notwithstanding, he was sort of known as like this, I don't know, just sort of like a B-grade hippie kind of actor, which I don't think is like an accurate portrayal of what his career really is. But I agree though. I can see why the Bill and Ted kind of persona stuck with him. I think the hair too kind of lends to that too.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
like kind of like it looks
Yeah.
like it's stoned.
Yeah.
It's funny because Rolling Stone listed this movie as number 8 on their 10 best stoner comedies, and I guess it is a stoner comedy, but they never explicitly like reference them being like
No, not at
stoners,
all.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like it's just like a persona thing. And you're kind of like assuming maybe that
Right.
could be part of the what's going on here.
Totally.
But I looked that up and I was like, oh yeah, they
That's
really
interesting.
say that they're like potheads, but I mean,
Which I feel like would be a pivotal, like one of those essential characteristics for a stoner comedy. Like I almost think like it doesn't really qualify. That I mentioned that too when I was telling you about my experience with the movie before seeing it. That's how I perceived it. And it was because of how they speak, and mostly my assumptions of that movie being a stoner comedy are from the dialogue itself. But like having watched it, I don't feel that way anymore, other than how they speak. But there's literally, like you said, there's literally no mention or even portrayal of marijuana anywhere. So I would say like it doesn't really qualify as one, but I don't know with the sequels if they maybe like kind of add any of that. Have you seen
it really
Bogus
isn't
Adventure?
isn't like kind of I've seen, it's been a while since I watched Bogus Journey, and in Face the Music too, it's not really explicitly kind of said. I mean, I guess it's just like an assumption based on how they act. And but I guess a stoner comedy can be like, okay, characters who are clearly potheads are characters who act as if they are clearly
I guess
potheads. And I guess it kind of also combines like the kind of slacker / stoner comedy. It's kind of mixed up with that a bit. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that they had that on the list. But I guess most people would consider, if you were to ask like random people, it might end up being on their list of stoner comedies. They might consider it one too. It'd be up there with like Half Baked or a few like what Fast Times at Ridgemont High, like some of those.
I gotta see that.
Days and Confused is another one. I guess.
Yes,
some people.
That's the ultimate. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's I wonder if there was any plans at all to make it explicitly known that they wore potheads. I actually don't really have to. I mean, maybe they're not, but like it's, what is it about them? And it really, I guess it really does depict a certain type of teenager during that time. They're like, school is kind of boring, and I have friends in high school that were in a band, and that's all they wanted to focus on, and they weren't all particularly great, much like this duo here. But they thought they were, and they really just cared about music, and that's all they wanted to do. So that part of the movie is kind of fairly accurate. And
it feels like they're portraying like a universal teenage experience. At least like if you weren't the type of teenager that they were, you probably had a couple buddies or knew some people at your high school that were like Bill and Ted.
Yeah,
but
definitely. Yeah. Wait, were there people like? I mean, I guess this kind of persona is not in your high school experience, but
no, like we
similar.
Not to this level. I really think like the accent and like the dialogue is like the standout, but there were some dopey, not academically gifted people, I guess, definitely from middle school and high school or junior high as it's known as. But it's really the dialogue I think separates Bill and Ted from maybe anybody that I knew from my high school, but definitely there were similar archetypes for sure. They seem like they're an amalgamation of a few, but definitely not far removed. I can think of probably some people I went to high school with that would strike me as a Bill and Ted type.
Yeah. I guess one of the early jokes I wanted to ask you about, and I think it's funny because like she is in the 2020 film too. So that's why I actually did like about it, is that they brought some of these key people back for that movie. But Bill's like a stepmom, Missy, where they constantly make jokes about her being like, I guess him being like, I think she's hot or attracted to her, like whatever. And then also the dad, that whole interaction with the dad and her when she she like brings in the grilled cheese sandwiches and he's like staring at her and not really listening to like their whole dilemma about like if they fail, like this is gonna happen. Did you think those jokes aged particularly well, or did they work for you, or was it weird, or what did you think of them?
It was kind of odd, I'm not gonna lie. Like it was a little funny, but like how when they leave the room and Ted is telling Bill, I'm probably going to mix up the names on a couple points, but
Bill's a blonde, and then Ted,
so
I guess Keanu Reeves,
Ted is telling Bill then that he suspects that Bill's dad is going to like, have sex with his stepmom right there in their room, like after
in the room. Yeah.
It kind of came across as odd, but like I was like, okay, maybe this is just of the time. However, I think like the recurring joke about Bill's stepmother being attractive, like kind of culminates in that joke at near the end, like during their not book report. What is it that they're trying to do? I'm not used to that
history,
term.
like
the history,
like presentation
presentation. Yeah.
Project. Yeah.
It all kind of comes to a head when there's this little snippet of Ted being on Sigmund Freud's like couch, and then he kind of like asks Bill if he wants to sit down on. He goes, "Oh no, I just have a slight Oedipus complex." Like that. That was funny. Like that really got a laugh out of me, and kind of like was a nod to like the earlier mentions of like his mom or stepmom being attractive. I thought the weirder part though, or what I just didn't find funny, and I didn't know why like this joke was so recurring, was like that he kept calling her, that she wanted to be called mom even though she was a stepmom, and he keeps calling her Missy.
Call her Missy.
I'm sorry, mom. I don't know. That didn't land with me. Not that I thought it was like not funny. It's just like I didn't know why. Once or twice was enough. But I think it happens like 3 or 4 times. Just thought that was odd. But I mean,
I think almost every time he is introduced with her, or if she comes into a scene,
right,
it's done. And like you said earlier, there's a lot of recycled jokes in the movie. I do agree with that. There's a lot of, you could tell. I mean, there's like I think in comedy there's like a rule of threes, and like after the third time, it's not supposedly not as funny anymore.
Yeah.
And some comedies don't really follow that. They'll just like run a certain joke into the ground until it's
even 3 can be pushing anymore. It depending on what it is. Like 2 was a golden number, I think. If it's good.
And this movie has a lot of, and I do agree with you though, that the whole joke with her does pay off in that one line during the presentation, because I actually laughed out loud at it when I was watching it today, because I totally forgot about it, and like his delivery of the line was perfect too, because it wasn't like too obvious. It was like, oh, that was clever. But it eventually like pays off in a really funny kind of way.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think it is a kind of a joke and thing of the time, and then kind of having like what she really looks like a typical like blonde kind of woman from the 80s, and like I think that was the whole like concept. And I think it kind of, I agree with you, the whole Missy thing didn't always, like, I think the first couple of times I thought it was kind of funny, but then it got recycled too much. But again, it does pay off with that really funny joke at the end.
Exactly, so which kind of makes it all worthwhile, which is fine with me.
That was great. But yeah, out of all the people that are sequences where they, go back and grab historical figures and and bring them back here, did you have like a favorite one of the historical figures that is featured in the movie?
I guess, I mean, Napoleon's a standout. I think just the recency bias of having just seen a movie all about him recently was kind of like he was top of mind, and he kind of gets, I think, of those historical figures, kind of gets a lot of the dedicated screen time as to his character. What was kind of bothersome is like the simplistic French dialogue that he gets. Like he's saying such, and I get it again. Like this is me like trying not to nitpick, but I'm like, it's kind of funny seeing all these. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many like so many historical figures, many of which didn't even speak English. It's kind of like, okay, how are they meaningfully communicating right now? And like, why is Napoleon saying like elementary level French sentences right now, like when he is like, a full grown man from France? But anyway, he had some funny stuff. I like that they kind of just like leave him with, is it Ted's younger brother?
Yeah, brother. Yeah.
That was kind of cool, and how they tie it into he has this big like moment in the water park at the end, which was called Waterloo. I thought that was kind of slick too. Yeah, but he would probably be like the one I think that I had the most fun with. Socrates was okay. I guess I thought it was kind of funny how they like referred to him as Socrates, because that's kind of
Socrates the entire time.
Like before I would have known how to pronounce his name, that's what I would have said in my head too. So that kind of got like a nostalgic kind of laugh at my younger self. And Beethoven too was good too.
Oh
yeah, that was funny.
They also butchered Sigmund Freud saying when they first said his last name. I thought like some of that was actually kind of funny. Because it's also very, and I think because it's just on brand for what those characters would think their names were.
Yeah,
they're that dumb. But like, so that's why it worked for me a little bit.
Did their high school history curriculum in any way reflect the one that you would have went through when you were a senior in high school?
I'm trying to remember what I was. I took. So was it world history, junior, senior year? I kind of remember which one's been so long.
It's probably a while back now, but
yeah. I just aged myself right now with, and then but yeah, I was. I don't know if I was explicitly senior year though. I remember learning about them throughout school, so I don't know if it was explicitly like a senior year thing. That was the other thing I was trying to think about was like how much of that is accurate to what you were learning about senior year of high school,
right?
And I don't. Yeah, I want to try to think back to that. I don't know.
I find it hard to believe that history was the only subject those guys would have been flunking.
I know. That is also a funny thing to point out that like this is the one class that determines like whether or not they're gonna flunk out. And I was like, they're probably not good at math, English, actually, biology, or anything that requires like a bunch of thinking outside of their music.
On that note, I had read too after watching the movie that Alex Winter, I guess, in some interview at some point after the movie, he'd said that over the years he gets two sorts of letters from teachers over the years, some from history professors and history teachers that praise his role in the movie for inspiring like an interest in history class from their students. And on the other side of that, he said he's gotten some mail from English teachers who like criticize the dialogue that he's inspired in some English students and how they talk, which I thought was really humorous.
That is funny. It's like they get both sides of it. Like, hey, like I could see if this for certain people, if you were a history teacher or I would say that as a history teacher, like if you were seeing students that were struggling to like pay attention to some of this stuff.
I would show this movie
and try to make it fun. Yeah, I mean that'd be an interesting way I think for them to learn about it and maybe dig deeper into learning, a more accurate depiction of some of this stuff. But yeah, I think that would be like a good way to get kids to learn.
If I was a teacher or professor, I would rely on film so much in my curriculum. Like there's just so much to be learned, even though like many movies embellish historical, people or events. Like it's such a good way of like informing somebody on like, what it was like to see something rather than to learn it out of a textbook can make it infinitely more interesting to some people. But yeah, I think this would be a humorous way of kind of like inspiring, a lackluster history student to get a little bit more involved. I wouldn't be surprised because it's pretty tame. It's rated G according to IMDb, so pretty family friendly. There's a one off the cuff, poorly aged joke. I think that's not even really a joke. It's just a line of dialogue that definitely was more of its time. I think I can't see that it would have been like that, like poorly received at the time. I don't think it would fly now. In the nonchalant way. You know what I'm talking about?
For what Jackson's referencing, there's like a derogatory term for someone who's gay, and they use it in the movie after he thinks that, which the scene leading up to that is actually funny, where he thinks that like Ted has been killed after they and he like realizes that Ted's alive, and they like hug, and after they hug, they like pull off of each other and they say that word. And I can see maybe in '89, and I probably got a big laugh. And I hate to say that, it probably did.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
But in today's day and age, I can't see that aging that well. It was interesting that I always think like when we look back on some of these movies for their anniversaries, it's like, whoa, why there's no checks and balances for some of this stuff.
That's right.
For some of this stuff, dude.
It's just what's half of the interest for me in covering like a little bit of an older movie is to see how much we've changed as a collective society, what flies now, what doesn't, what stands out, and what is still the norm. But that one was definitely, like I told you off camera when we brought that up, I wasn't even sure that I heard it right. I was kind of like looked away for a moment, but like judging on the context, what I saw on the screen, what I thought I saw, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's what they said, but I wasn't even sure. I didn't expect it because the rest of the movie doesn't really have anything I would even consider remotely offensive. Maybe like if you're a history teacher, I'm sure some of the depictions of some of those people, historical figures might catch a side eye or something, but nothing to be blatantly offensive, at least. So I think, and still that word notwithstanding, I think it still holds up pretty great as
as I just like I wanted to bring it up why I had it up. Alex
Mm.
Winter did comment on that scene in particular. This was back in what I pulled up was from 5 years ago, so still recent enough.
Yeah, definitely.
Because a few people on Twitter at the time said, "I love the Bill and Ted movies, but has anyone ever asked Alex Winter and Keanu about all the times they call someone or each other the F word?" And then someone else said, "As someone who grew up being called that word, I actually never felt offended when you guys said it because it was kind of lighthearted and done for laughs." And so they got two different opinions on how that was. And Alex Winters said, yes, we've absolutely addressed this in the past. It speaks to the insensitivity of those times that none of us are proud of and certainly don't intend to repeat. And that he thinks the moment still makes him wince a little bit. It's cringy for him.
I can see that. Yeah.
So at least he knows and is aware.
That's an awesome response, though. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure Keanu Reeves feels the same way. So, but I'm glad they commented on it because they probably had to, especially probably as they were doing that new movie and having to promote that. I'm sure that would get brought up again in like, kind of retrospective kind of way. Like, hey, how do you think this has aged well?
I think it's important. Sorry, what's that?
No. And honestly, like you said, I think it's one of the only things in it that hasn't aged well. Like that's one of the ones that stood out.
On that note, I think it makes an interesting conversation. I think it's important, at least for the most part. I'm sure there's standouts, but I think it's important in the context of movies and actors doing their job, reading a script and delivering a line. Important not to hold them too accountable for stuff, especially when you look back years and years later, what might have been able to fly back then that might not now with the changing of, some, cultures and sensitivities and whatnot. I think it's important to not hold them too accountable and demonize them for something that they may have said such and such years ago. It depends. So you got to take their character into account, their character as a person, not who they're portraying. And at the end of the day, as long as it's not, a well-documented case of improv, they are reading something that was written for them to say. So, but it
true. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think it is a product of the time. I think in the 2000s and on, the whole kind of male relationship in these kind of movies changes where, it's almost like accepted to have this kind of like bromance in these kind of movies.
Right.
And that really changed over time. But I think in the 80s, 90s, we even saw that when we talked about Can't Hardly Wait. They use that word in that movie too.
Right.
As a joke. And it's probably gonna be in a couple other movies we cover for anniversaries too, where it's like that's just a product of the time, and it's unfortunate. But you do see a change in it in these kind of movies. Like I said, in the 2000s and so where it seemed like male relationships in TV and in movies like evolved into like, hey, you can be like affectionate with your male friend. It doesn't mean anything more than that, other than you're friends and you love each other, and that's it. And exactly. I think I'm glad that changed over time. But I think what's unfortunate is that in 1988 or whatever, 87, when they were doing this movie, that line was written, it was uttered, and I don't think anyone batted an eyelash.
No, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that was the case
at all. I also thought it was interesting about the historical figures, how there's certain amount of time developed to certain people, like the whole Billy the Kid sequence is a little longer. I mean, then it seems like they rush through gathering, like I think it's like Joan of Arc, Genghis Khan, Beethoven, and something for all those scenes are like very like quick because you tell they're like maybe they need to just like it just felt like interesting that it was like a kind of rush for their stuff, and certain other characters got more time to like to the point.
Definitely, Abraham Lincoln was a quick one too. And on that note, I'm glad you bring that up because like it was totally messing with my perception of time in the movie. I was like, oh, so clearly they are gathering all these people to present at their history presentation at the end of the movie. So, but then come to find out, there's like a whole sequence after they have all the historical figures at the mall and whatnot and the water park. And I was like, there's still, I'm not sure where we're at in the movie. I never once checked to see how. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll like check, okay, where we're at. Not that when I'm bored or something. I'm curious, like what do I have left to look at in this movie?
How much movie's left?
Where are we at? Yeah, how much movie's left? But I didn't do that when I was watching this, but I was like, mostly because my computer that I was streaming it from was like too far away from me and I didn't care enough to get out. But I was thinking after there was so much happening, once they did get all the like history figures, I was like, where's this going? Where are we? Like I thought they would go right from there to the school, but no, it was pretty neat. I guess that's another huge thing that dates this movie is the mall.
I guess the mall. Yeah. So in the 80s and 90s, a lot of mall references in a lot of these movies. I mean, you see it in Clueless. I mean, like Clueless is a big one where like the mall is like a character in and of itself. It gets mentioned a lot and definitely has a certain look during that time period. I actually think the mall sequence, even though it feels a little tacked on, is it's still pretty fun. And I also love the song "Play With Me" by Extreme. I love that song they use for that sequence. Actually, that's how I learned who Extreme was, because I had no idea. Because I used to hear their song. They have a song in the 90s called "More Than Words." It's like a slow acoustic song that is their biggest song, but I didn't know it was them until I heard this song from this movie, and I was like, "Oh, who is this? This Extreme?" And I was like, "Oh, never heard of them." They're like, "Oh, yeah, you have, because they did this other song," and I was like, "What?" And I guess like "More Than Words" is very sappy and acoustic. It's the only song that they have that's like that. Their other songs sound more like the song that was used in the movie.
I can't even picture it right now.
But yeah, it's a fun little sequence. It does feel like it's done to like, because they have to add like one extra layer of conflict, it seems, to like before getting to that point. Like
it did feel tacked on. I agree. I was kind of like, what are we doing here? But again, looking at it, like turning my brain off, it felt fine. It did kind of remind me, I don't know why, not in the sense that the example in a bunch of Cher felt like it was tacked on, but for whatever reason, it was giving me the parade in Ferris Bueller's Day Off sort of vibes. I don't know. Yeah, just kind of felt, I kind of was relating to that scene for a moment when I was watching it.
Yeah. And yeah, you can tell that it's only there to like get them into trouble, so they get arrested, and adds another, like throws another wrench in getting them to school on time. And same thing with like Napoleon at the water park. Even though I do love him running back and forth and like either moving kids out the way to go down the water slides, or trying to communicate with him about how fun it is, or like why he wants to cut them, so he keep going back and forth. I thought that was kind of funny, but that's more of the credit to the guy who played him more than and some nice editing for that too.
Yeah, he has the best time of any of the figures in modern times. He gets to like go bowling and have ice cream, and which I guess was still a thing back in his time. But and then
that massive sundae looks so fucking delicious. That's why I was like, the whole time I was watching it today, I was like, oh, that looks so good. And he fucking devours the whole thing, and they're just looking at him like he's so gross, because he takes that one last one and like licks his finger and like gets the rest of it off the table, and they're just like, yeah.
I guess the real Napoleon Bonaparte was quite fond of ice cream. I read too afterwards.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So we do learn something from watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Clearly, there was guess the writers must have, in some capacity, been history fans for them to choose this, like this class of all things, for them to be struggling in and to focus so much on history. I'm guessing that they were interested at least mildly in it, and that's depicted a lot. Like there's a lot of subtle details that relate to these characters that like are kind of them going above and beyond, like naming or having like the water park be called Waterloo. Like that's just like a slick little nod. Yeah, exactly. There's lots of that hidden throughout, which is great.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that they said in 1991 they did an interview where they were talking about the original concept for who they thought Bill and Ted would be, and they said they envisioned them as 14-year-old skinny guys with low rider bell bottoms and heavy metal t-shirts who were despised by popular kids at school. And then they said casting Reeves and Winter changed the filmmakers' images of characters, because once you cast Alex and Keanu, who looked like pretty cool guys, that was hard to believe.
Interesting that they would have been pretty cool guys in the 80s. I wasn't really sure what I thought of what their look would have been, like how it would have been received in like an average high school in America. But I mean, Keanu Reeves is Keanu Reeves. But
I also was wondering if what their stat. I mean, this is probably me thinking well beyond the movie than I probably should, about what their status was in high school. Like how known they were. Were they only each other's friends? Did they have other friends?
Any of that? Yeah,
we don't get any of that. And during their history presentation, no one's really like making fun of them or anything. It seems like they're like invested in it. So yeah, I was like, did they know other people? Like, what was their role in high school? But that's me thinking well beyond probably what the writers thought about it.
Yeah,
for the movie,
perhaps.
And then they said the original spec was called Bill and Ted's Time Van, and the core
Oh
plot was
man.
the core plot was similar, with Bill and Ted on the verge of failing their history class, ruining their plans to form a band. However, it deviated from the film version when they borrowed a van from their 28-year-old friend Rufus. While driving the van, they end up in Nazi Germany, and after some hijinks, bring Adolf Hitler back to present-day San Dimas before continuing to collect other historical figures. Solomon said this approach
Okay.
became problematic, and Hitler was switched out with Napoleon in their final script. Other ideas in the spec script that were dropped included more involvement of Bill and Ted's classmates, including having them time travel with them, visiting Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire, and ending up causing his death, and helping a prehistoric caveman invent fire so they could light up a joint. So I guess it would have been more explicitly.
Okay. Oh, those would have been awesome scenes to have included in that movie, especially the Julius Caesar. He would have been a great character to have brought back.
Yeah.
I can't believe Hitler was initially who
that
they were
would have
going to bring
gone
back.
over
What the
well.
fuck?
That wouldn't have gone over well at all, dude.
No.
I'm trying to imagine how it would go over.
I'm thinking of it would have been like a Jojo Rabbit sort of Hitler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That probably would have been something like that. But I'm glad they ended up dropping that. And then some other actors that they said audition for Ted. Some names that you might know: River Phoenix, and Sean Penn, and Brendan Fraser.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I find Sean Penn actually looks a lot like Alex Winter.
Yeah, if you watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I guess that's really why they thought maybe Sean Penn would be good.
When did Ridgemont High come out?
It was like more like in the early '80s, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So a few years before this movie.
That's been on my list for so long, man. I can't even tell you. I've just never got around to it.
Funny.
Cam's always, or he's tried to get me to watch that several times over the years, but we just have settled on something else. But I'm going to bookmark that.
And then George Carlin, they originally wanted, because the movie is so tied to music, they wanted Eddie Van Halen as Rufus, but they didn't have enough money to get, because they mentioned Van Halen a few times in the movie, to get him. They also had a list that included Ringo Starr, Sean Connery, and Charlie Sheen. George Carlin was a happy accident that was done close to when the film's production was nearly complete. He did all of his stuff like towards the end with them.
Okay.
And George Carlin is like, it's always interesting to watch him here because he's known for being a pretty raunchy, blunt comedian. Like his stand-up is like very, very like fun. It's funny, but it's like, whoa. So when you watch him in this, he is so subdued. And it feels very different from anything that you've seen him do.
Is that what I would know him from? His comedy stand-up? Because I'm dating myself or aging myself a little bit here. I don't know. I know the name George Carlin, and I recognize him seeing him in this, but I don't know why. Like, he wasn't like the X-Files guy, was he?
No.
Twilight Zone or something? No.
He was in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. I don't know if you've ever seen that. He's in another Kevin Smith movie, Dogma. He's in that as a priest. He's in Scary Movie 3. He also did some voice for he was a voice Fillmore in Cars. It would be mostly stand-up, if anything.
That must be what I'm thinking of him from, but I've never seen his stand-up. I just like know the name, and I just couldn't tell you where I knew him from. Yeah,
but it is crazy. I watched it. It's not like he's good in the movie. He does what he needs to do, and it works. But yeah, he's so. This is not what because I had experience with him before this, and then since this, even as a young kid, had seen some of his stuff. Probably shouldn't have. Very different, but good to see that he has like some range to do something a little bit different. And then the three most important people in the Utopian Society were envisioned to be portrayed by the band members of ZZ Top, and also Joan of Arc, the girl who plays Joan of Arc. Jane Wyland, she's actually in the band The Go-Go's, who are big for the songs We Got the Beat, Our Lips Were Sealed, and Vacation. They were pretty big in the 80s. I don't know how she ended up in this movie, but that's her. Some fun little facts. What did you this is me nitpicking the movie probably too much. Yeah, the history presentation is cool and it's fun, and I love how it's thrown together. My train of thought in the middle of it, I was like, when did they have the time to throw it together the way that they threw it together, because
When did
that
they
is something
rehearse
that
all
seems,
this?
yeah, because that seems like something that needs to be rehearsed and thought out, not in like, how many ever minutes it took them to get, like,
Well,
they're busy the whole time leading up to, like, they have to get
yes,
everyone there, and I was like, how did they do that?
and
Again, probably being too picky about it.
I mean, I was doing the exact same thing. Like my brain was taking me all sorts of different questions, like how are all these historical figures not freaking out that they've been whipped into 1980s, and how are they all on the same page here and willing to perform for these two random guys, sort of thing. Like I was, you got to suspend your disbelief to even appreciate this movie at all.
Yep.
What I found myself thinking throughout is how are they going to bring these people back? Because a lot of these historical figures, most of them, don't have very happy endings. So, and I'm sure
I
like
know, right?
maybe Bill and Ted would have known a little bit. Obviously, they probably would have known that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated.
That's what
That
they did.
your actually a few of them were assassinated. Joan of Arc was assassinated. Beethoven or Napoleon is rumored to have been assassinated. I'm not thinking they would know all these details about all these people, but I was like, what do they think is going to happen to these people when they're done with their presentation? Are they going to go willfully off? And honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't exactly remember. Do they all just jump back in the time machine at the end and they just zip off? Or?
Yeah, they're all like,
the
presentation ends, and then they get in the time machine and it disappears, and we don't really see them individually go back to where they're from.
Right.
But that is a very interesting tidbit. Like if you were Bill and Ted, I mean, I'm guessing maybe they didn't. Well, no, they had to learn enough about them to know that what their fates were. So would you send them back to where, so their time?
It's like a Spider-Man No Way Home sort of scenario.
Yeah. I was like, that is an interesting way to think about it. The way I like the one thing they said about Joan of Arc is that she was going to take like the stuff that she had learned from like that aerobics sequence at the mall, and she was going to take that back to like train like all their fighters and warriors and stuff. I was like,
that
that's
didn't
all
happen.
that's not what happened at all. But yeah, you're right. You got to suspend your disbelief a bit.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, there must have been like a cut sequence where they actually like went over the presentation, because like it was like so like
it must have,
prepared and like thought out. Even to the point where Billy the Kid gets introduced everyone. Like, I mean, there was a lot of like, it was so thorough. I mean, fun, still really fun. I thought that.
I'm curious if there is like somewhere out there director's cut, because there's like an hour footage they cut from what they originally filmed. Like it seems like there's a whole movie missing in there. Not missing in the sense that it comes across like it's missing, but there's a lot of details left on the cutting room floor, no doubt.
Yeah, it seemed like there would be, and because like they said, what the original cut was almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah, exactly, and then it ends up being an hour and a half.
Yeah, that is crazy. I found something. Yeah, the initial cut of the film was 2 hours and 25 minutes long, and was proved significantly. One such film scene was a lengthy choreographed song number that would have led off the film, starting with Bill and Ted dancing via air guitaring on their way to school. It ended up getting bullied by jocks once they arrived. So I guess that would have you would have known their roles in high school if they would have kept that.
Okay.
They said in February 2020, Winter found some stills from the film version of the scene on an old hard drive and shared them on the internet with some additional details on its production. Winter believed that Kenny Ortega had been involved in establishing the choreography for that scene based on the time period and his recollection. Winter said neither he nor Reeves could dance prior to shooting the scene, so the scene was rehearsed for roughly an hour a day across several weeks, concurrent to other parts of filming. Winter identified other scenes that he recalled filming that had been cut, including a scene involving a prom and a running gag involving the pudding cups and the John the Surf character that remained in the film's credits. While they had tried to find the film reels with this cut footage, Winter said that with the fate of the original studio that had the film following its release, it was likely all lost. It's unfortunate. Wow,
Yeah,
but I can't believe they cut. There was a whole like dance sequence at the beginning.
Yeah,
of the movie. I was like, it's already silly enough.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't vibe with that very much.
Already silly enough, and that would have been. I mean, maybe it would have worked. I don't know, but I can't imagine watching a 2.5 hour cut of this movie. It's perfectly fine at 90 minutes.
Yeah, I'm grateful for its 90-minute runtime. I'm not gonna lie. I think that was like a perfect. I wish more movies were that length. Honestly,
yeah.
That's why I think it's part of why I love John Carpenter's movies so much, because they're almost always an hour and a half or even shorter. It's great. Just coming across an interesting piece of trivia here that I think is hilarious. I guess Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is one of 5 movie productions in which Genghis Khan and Abraham Lincoln appear together as characters. The other, I know 5, right? I would have thought 1 or 2 at most, but the others are The Savage Curtain from 1969, which I've never heard of. Futurama, I guess, the television show. Clone High from 2002. You ever hear that? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
And Night at the Museum, which makes sense too.
That's funny. I would have thought 1 or 2 as well.
Yeah.
5 productions together. You know what scene is actually pretty funny? I found myself like giggling at it. Is when they're in like the suits of armor and they have the swords, and then they start doing this whole like lightsaber, like Star Wars fight. And like it's another thing that feels like so unnecessary. Like it doesn't, but I guess it just informs their characters like this is just who they are. And but it was just so funny, and the dialogue exchange between them was really funny. Like I'll never rule the galaxy with you, dude. Like that's all like Patrick. Really good.
I actually, I got some humor out of that scene too, and honestly, made me think of like how much that Star Wars is influenced by like swords and sandals epics too.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. Yeah.
And I also like their interactions when they meet the two princesses that they said they're gonna meet. And they're like trying to figure out how to talk to them, and then Bill's just like, recite some lyrics, dude. And like what he says to them is not even that thought provoking, but it works for them, I guess. And they end up using those. At least I don't think it's the same actresses, but they are in the sequel, so they still sit together.
Okay, cool.
Pretty.
I see Samara Weaving is in Bill.
And she's I
cool.
believe a daughter of one of the, I believe Bill, if I'm remembering right. She's in it. Kid Cudi's in it too. It's like random cast.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, he shows up in the most random movies.
Yeah. But yeah, there was like a lot. And me and my friends also used to always quote that "string things are afoot at the Circle K" line.
You just read my mind. Yeah, that was probably my favorite line. I heard it just throughout time, but never really knew the context behind it. But like hearing it, I was like, that is a great delivered line from this movie.
Yeah. So as far as time traveling movies go, I mean, I everyone kind of makes fun of time traveling movies because they have to create their kind of own science. So sometimes because it's like,
definitely,
does that work? Does this work? Now I'm not saying that this movie is in the grand pantheon of time travel movies, or maybe some people think it is. But for what it's trying to do and what it accomplishes, you think that it is a decent time travel experience?
Absolutely. Physics aside and all that, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it holds much in terms of reality, how it would actually go. Obviously, that's way too far-fetched to really take seriously, but I think, I didn't even know it was a time travel movie before I watched it. So I was like, oh, this is kind of slick. I think it holds up, definitely. I mean, it's kind of funny too, how a lot of influence was taken from Back to the Future in the original draft of the script too, where they wanted to use a van as like their method of traveling throughout time, and I think they ended up scrapping that, thinking that it was a little bit too close to Back to the Future. But I think there's comparisons to then. I think it may have even have influenced other ones too, but I think it definitely earns its right as one of the ultimate time travel movies, which again is so funny to me. Like I had no idea that it even delved into that at all beforehand. That's how little I knew about this movie.
Yeah, I just love the simplicity of how they time traveled in the phone booth, just like typing in, basically the dates into the phone pad, and then they had that like kind of like yellow pages like directory, like where they could go like anywhere they wanted in time. Yeah. So it's so funny because it's so simple. Like it's the most simple.
The rules are so broad.
Yeah, but I thought that was kind of cool.
And I like to.
I think.
Nothing that they really like messed up in the past had really had any bearing on the present or the future too, which was kind of funny. It's nice to not be bound to those rules in a time travel movie, which is kind of just a nice break. Seems like so many of them like try their best to work around that, but Bill and Ted just didn't seem to bother worrying about that.
Yeah, like at all.
No, not at all.
And then the whole and I want to ask you too, is like, yeah, like I said, the plot it's silly and it's off the wall. Did you find yourself rolling your eyes at the overall concept of like these two, their music is gonna be like, it becomes like
important to society in the future that all these resources are are scrapped together to make sure that they, you know, do what they got to do and get their history report on time. I was like, yeah, this is very lowbrow, corny 80s cheese, which I also can appreciate too, because I love, you know, that era and stuff. But it definitely felt like this whole movie feels like it could be an episode of like an Twilight Zone show or something. You know what I mean? But no, I think it's still charming, and I think they do enough with the movie that it's kind of separates itself from like the cheesiness. Definitely cheesy. I know we were saying that October Sky and our last anniversary episode kind of bordered on cheese and never really got there, but this one definitely embraces it, I think.
Yeah, I mean that whole sequence where they travel to where like the three most important people are, and they see them, and they're like hear the music, and they have that whole crowd doing the whole like thing that they see them doing.
Yeah, that part was a little odd to me too.
And they had the whole like, you know, supposed to be deep, like be most excellent to each other,
right?
And like I do think it's kind of funny that is, you know, the fate of their, I guess not their. It seems like the fate of their world is, you know,
right,
hung on these two guys, these two slackers passing their history class. I think it's so. I think, you know what, it's so over the top that it probably does work.
Yeah, over the top is right.
And like, I always thought that was interesting. And they don't really. I love that the movie doesn't really like go out of their way to explain how important they are. They're just like, hey, this is like what their music is going to. This is what's going to happen. There's no real like deeper thought into it other than what we're told. And they're like, all right, and you just run with it and go with it.
I do, thinking about it now, though, I do think it's kind of interesting. There is a parallel there in how impactful music is on culture and society. So I think it's kind of cool that they just kind of lend into that thought on a very extreme end. Yeah,
that's true. Actually, I didn't think about it that way. That's pretty interesting. And then, like we said, Bill and Ted was released on February 17, 1989, grossed $40.4 million domestically in a budget of $10 million. Considering that the original studio went bankrupt and this had to be shopped around and wasn't released until 1989, I would say that it did pretty well for its time. When it came out. The film currently holds an 82% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. However, some professional critics that didn't like the movie. The Washington Post gave the film a negative review, finding the script written by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon as made only the sketchiest attempts to draw their historical characters. They exist as foils and nothing else, and the gags that they are hung on them are far from first rate. And that if director Stephen Herek has any talent for comedy, it's not visible here. More than anything, the picture looks paltry and undernourished. The New York Times referred to the film as a painfully inept comedy. The Los Angeles Times said they were unimpressed with it, concluding, make no mistake, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is not a satire of mindlessness. It's unabashed glorification of dumbness for dumbness' sake. That's what this movie is. Bill and Ted are heroic in their ability to reduce some of the history's great minds to their level.
That is quite the slander.
Despite that, it was a big hit with audiences, and it spawned a lot of stuff. There was a cartoon that came off, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, an animated series that first ran on CBS in 1990 and featured the voices of Winter, Reeves, and Carlin returning in their film roles. And then there was a second season of 8 episodes that ran on Fox Kids with the voice cast of Fox's then upcoming live action series. There was a live action series that came out in that period called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, but Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter did not do that. They also have several DC Comics tie-ins for Bill and Ted. There have also been video games for Game Boy, NES, Atari. When the movies were very popular, they were featured in Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios Orlando and in Hollywood. And also, like we said, there's been 2 sequels. Bogus Journey it's funny, but it's a lot different. It's like it feels darker and it's satire. And like there's this whole thing with like the Grim Reaper, which actually has become its own funny thing that franchise is referenced from.
Face of Music has a character named Death. I know that much.
He's introduced in the second one. It's funny, but it feels like the writers were probably more high when they made Bogus Journey.
Okay. High on different supply, maybe.
Yeah, when they put that together. But I think what has carried on through all three of them, and it starts here, I think what works is, like we said, the chemistry between the two leads, and the concept in the first movie is so it's so like off the wall, but it works because it's also kind of simple in how they put it all together. And and I don't know, when you're watching the whole history presentation at the end, you, as an audience member, you almost feel like proud of them. Oh, look, they put it together. They did what they need to do, and it's informative enough, I guess. And you're happy that they accomplished what they set out to accomplish. Definitely. Whether or not you think their business is going to save the world later, is another story. Because I love that by the end of the movie, they're still not very good at
I guess not.
Musicians. And they have that whole joke like, well, they do get better at the end of the movie.
Yes.
But yeah, I still found it highly enjoyable, and I think there's a reason why I did watch it a lot growing up as a kid. It is I think when you're a kid and you're watching it, it's probably a lot more fun.
I think I would have really benefited from having seen it earlier in life, but just I never ever crossed paths with this movie, so that's why if it wasn't for the show, I don't even know when I would have gotten around to seeing Bill and Ted. It's a movie I've never even really discussed with my film loving friends. I don't even know if I've seen a physical copy of this anywhere. So glad I finally got to experience it, though. Like you said, now it's under my belt. Yeah. But piggybacking off what you just said, I think it'd be a great time to segue into our rating. Seems like you're very fond of this movie. I want to know what you think.
I am.
What's your score?
I was like thinking about what yours might be, and I was like, oh, I can't tell.
Don't worry about that. You go first.
Oh, by the way, there are physical copies of this.
I figured there were. Yeah, okay, that's a great looking Blu-ray that you got there. Hold that up again. I want to see the cover of that.
Yep, it's nice. Not as cool as the official poster for the movie. The official poster is a little bit more fun. It kind of is a riff on this, but it has like all the historical figures like in the phone booth, and they're sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
You know what? This is gonna be one of those things where nostalgia plays a big part.
And that's totally fine. Absolutely.
I'm gonna give it a 4. If we're doing letterbox scores,
yeah,
I'm gonna give it a 4. Okay. And this is just purely based on I grew up with it. It's a fun movie to grow up with, and I think it still holds up mostly as a comedy, with the exception of that one joke that we mentioned earlier, right? And maybe the stuff with like the stepmom, the whole Missy thing. That could be another one.
Yeah, it was a little off the cuff.
But I don't know. I think it's funny, and it's a nice breezy 90 minutes, and Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, like, they're having so much fun that it's almost infectious. We can complain about like some of the recycled jokes, and there are a lot of them, but they are 100% committed to these roles that you start to like them more. Like, they're dim-witted, and they're not totally with it, but you start to like love them despite that. And I think that has a lot to do. That has a lot to do with like how good those two were in those roles. And guys, whoever's listening, this is a lot of it is nostalgia based, right? Why I'm giving it 4 stars.
It's all personal preference, right? I mean, that's totally how your score should be assessed, right? I mean, that's it's arbitrary to begin with, so it's what it means to you. And with that being said, like, again, I didn't have nostalgia for this movie. It was a first time watch. Judging on that alone, I think this score, which it might be like surprising, it might sound like it's negative, but like I'm giving it a high. This is higher than I think I would maybe give like another comedy in the same vein. For me, if we're going letterbox, like I'd give it a nice like 50%, a 2.5 stars out of 5 for me. And
see, that does sound low on paper. Okay, like a hard 2.5.
Exactly.
A really good 2.5.
I'd round up before I'd round down. You know what I mean? And I think maybe a future viewing of this movie might increase that score. But as a first time watch, like I said, I'm really biased towards comedies as it is. So that's a good score for like an 80s comedy for me.
That's an interesting thing too, because like we've both talked about how like comedies for us are our least favorite genre, and when they're really bad, they're really bad, and when they're really good, they can be really good. I will say, for someone who is I guess known you for over a year now, like that would be a decent score from you for a comedy like this.
Is that kind of where you thought I would land?
Yeah, I thought possibly a 3, but I'm not surprised that it's 2.5. And people that listen know that you explain your scores pretty well. Like, you're not like, don't think this is like and I don't think the movie's awful by any means. Like,
No, not at all.
it
Yeah.
works for what it is, and the fact that you had no, like, even though it was about time travel, you only really knew about the Keanu Reeves meme, and I mean, I guess the title of the movie, and that was about it. Then the fact that you said you probably wouldn't even like have seen it anytime soon if not for this.
That's right.
It's pretty interesting. It is interesting to kind of see like what these movies mean to like different generations of people. So like me having grown up with it, it's gonna hit differently than someone who just watched it for the first time today. So
exactly, which is a lot of the fun. That's a big part of what I like breaking down movies like this that you've seen and that I haven't, and vice versa. The odd time it happens when I've seen something that you haven't. I love getting someone's first perspective on something like that. But I anticipate like my enjoyment of this movie will increase over time. It'll probably be a while before I see it again, but I would definitely like check out the sequels, like no question about it. I'll probably tell Cam about this one, see if he has any interest, or I'd pick his brain and see if he's already seen it, because like that's my go-to. Other than you, of course, like that's in person. That's who I bounce movies off of. So be interested to chat about that one a little bit further if he has seen it and see what the sequels are all about. But yeah, and then might be
a fun one to watch with a friend too.
I was going to say that. Yeah, if I watched this with you in person, I'm sure your enjoyment of that would infect me and like make me enjoy it more. There's a lot of movies. Like there's a lot of movies like that your enjoyment with like watching it with somebody that enjoys it is going to influence. So I think I definitely would. This would be a great like buddy movie to watch with a couple buddies some night, like Saturday night sort of thing. But I mean, I just watched it alone for the first time today, so that's kind of what I'm left with. But overall, I'm skewing positive, not negative, which is a bonus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we got it in for the 35th anniversary. So it was a good time for you to catch up on it. And I'm glad the show actually provides a way for you to see stuff that you probably would have never, ever thought about watching.
Exactly. So am I.
So that's the positive side of doing like the anniversaries, which is why when we pick some of them are of course obvious ones. I think this one might be an obvious one because it's a pretty popular movie within people that love it. Right. But a lot of these are kind of like, oh, he hasn't seen it. Sometimes it's been a while since I've seen something. Yes. So like where are we gonna fall? Sometimes we don't even actually most of the times lately we haven't discussed anything about the movies until we start recording. So like you get to watch it and I get to rewatch it and we get like no real exchange at all until we start recording, which I think actually works best a little bit.
Yeah, me too. I like to do that as well. I mean, sometimes it's a no-brainer for covering something that we both have seen several times and we know that we already like it. It's kind of like, okay, of course. But with something like this, I'm surprised. Like, I didn't realize that you didn't know that I hadn't seen this before. So that was interesting.
No, I kind of thought maybe you might have seen it once. And happy accident for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And a nice little one to conclude our February anniversaries. I know we have a lot coming for you in March. The only one I can say, well, only two I can say for sure that we're doing, and one of them will probably come up sooner than the other one. We know we want to do Cruel Intentions. That anniversary is March 5th. It's 25th anniversary. So that'll probably be one of the next anniversary episodes you guys hear on the show. And then I know our boy Jackson wants to do Heathers, which is I also want to do that one too.
Yeah, towards the end of the month.
But there's a lot of stuff in the middle there where we need to pick ones that we know for sure we want to do, and then we're gonna leave it up to you guys with a few choices to pick another one. So it gets fun in March. There's a lot to pick.
These are really picking up. I'm seeing the list too that we got up to May here. But stay tuned, guys, to to our socials where we're gonna have you guys maybe select one for us to cover in March, and probably for the remainder of the months of the year. We're not gonna be able to get them all, but it'd be nice for you guys to vote and let us know what you want to see us cover. I'm excited for that. We did that a little bit. I think we did that back in whenever we did Pirates of the Caribbean. I can't remember if it was October.
Yeah, September. We did start, and it was something that we wanted to do consistently, but then the strike was going on. There wasn't a lot to like discuss, and then we started the whole Then we did the Tales of Horror thing, which kind of made it harder to do the anniversary voting process. But it is something that we're gonna pick up again in March and throughout the rest of the year to mostly help us because we want to make sure that you guys hear one that you really want to hear, but also it takes some of the stress off of us picking one of the
Yes,
movies,
which is nice.
and allowing you guys to do it. So that'll be fun though. Hopefully you guys choose well.
Yeah, so stay tuned to that. And I think if there's nothing else, that wraps up our anniversary of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Also, episode 153 of Back to the Blockbuster. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in to another weekly episode. And if you guys feel like taking an excellent adventure yourself, feel free to time travel through our playlist. We have 152 other episodes for you guys to listen to. And you guys are able to find those anywhere where you get your podcasts. But of course, feel free to download the playlist app anywhere, depending on whatever sort of device you have. You can find it on your app store and give Back to the Blockbuster a follow and a listen to there. And of course, check out our next episode. We'll be breaking down the last couple of weeks of industry news. And of course, look forward to further anniversary episodes for the month of March coming here soon. Check us out on our socials. And of course, we will see you next time. Gaius, always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And I love that little improv throwing in the Excellent Adventure
I'm
and
trying,
the time
dude.
traveling to our old episodes. I was like, I know you didn't write that. I was like off the cuff. Good job.
Well, thank you.
Good
Take
job,
care,
my
guys.
friend. Until next time.